Carol is our dual master gardener and master food preserver, as well as food hero, um, liaison worker, amazing person. So Carol, take us away.
That's true. I'm Carol, and I'm a master gardener, and I also participate in the OSU Extension Master Food Preserver Program, as does Diane. So
Oh, okay.
I'm glad that she's here and she can keep me honest. So we wanted to keep your thoughts stimulated related to preserving some garden produce and lead you towards some helpful resources when you get to that point of the year. Next slide. So whether you're preserving your own harvest or you've gathered locally grown fruits or vegetables, the four methods of food preserving, canning, actually there's two types of canning, you know, boiling water and pressure canning, but canning, freezing, pickling, and drying make it possible to serve foods that taste harvest fresh at a later date. Next. So food preservation really is a science, and that allows us to keep foods beyond their usual spoilage time, and also provides possibilities for being creative and artistic. The thing is, though, that the tested guidelines are there. The science part of it keeps us safe related to making sure that heat penetrates to the center of a jar that you're canning so that microorganisms are not able to grow. The science might also be related to monitoring pH of products when they're produced a particular way with a particular type of vinegar. Might also be monitoring nutrient retention so that you get the most nutrition value from the food preservation. So the tested guidelines that we speak of relate to providing the best quality, and that would mean keeping the best color and the best texture and the most flavor. The guidelines might be related to the best nutrient value, again, doing things in a particular way so that you do keep as many nutrients as possible. And then probably the part that people are most concerned about are the guidelines that protect us from foodborne illness to again, have our foods as safe as possible. Next. So in the participant folder, there's a list of food preservation resources for you. There's a link to the OSU Extension food preservation area. You can find there lots of online publications for drying and canning and freezing. And there are some of them that are also in Spanish. There is a link towards the Master Food Preserver program. If you'd like to learn more about that, it's very similar to Master Gardener, where you get some very wonderful training. Unfortunately, that training hasn't been able to happen the last couple of years in person, so we're getting lots of Zoom training these days, but it's a very nice program and you learn a lot, and then you're able to go out in the community and help with other programs so that people can share all this food preservation knowledge. You can follow the Master Food Preservers on Facebook, and that very first graphic is the logo for the state food preservation Facebook. And then Linn-Benton County also has a Facebook account as well. So, and there are food preservers who are sharing information via Facebook, since we haven't been able to have the in-person classes like usual. So it's a great place to go and ask questions or to see videos and such. There's also a canning timer and checklist app, and the middle graphic is the logo for that app. And it's a very nice way to avoid making mistakes with food preservation. So if you go in and say that you want to preserve green beans, for example, it will only give you the directions for safe ways of doing green beans. So there's no way to boiling water bath green beans, because that would be a surefire way to kill everybody in your family. So it's very nice. And then you can press the timer and it keeps track of times for you and such. Very, very nice. There's a link to the National Center for Home Food Preservation, where the majority of the research that's done, like I mentioned, pH and internal temperatures and such, and then they share that with places, other state extension programs. And there's a link to ball preserving. That would be that is the private company that does food preservation testing. So you can feel comfortable with any of the recipes that are on the Ball website. They also have answers to common questions such as, how can I tell if the recipe that my grandmother gave me is safe, and other similar things. They have recipes, and the nice thing about Ball is that they have the resources to do a little bit more of the artistic kinds of recipes that are also safe, versus the kinds of things that you might do in your own kitchen thinking that it's safe, but you don't really know if it's safe or not. They have some very nice instructional videos, and you might be familiar with the Ball Blue Book of Preserving, and that would be a book that's around quite often, easy to find in bookstores and such. With most with that particular food preservation book which would be the other one that I would guide you towards, would be to look for ones that are current, that are more modern, versus a vintage one, because things have changed. Next. So this is a perfect time to start planning for preserving. Think about preserving while you're making your garden decisions. There may be some types of vegetable herbs that you want to grow because they are part of your preserving plans. You might want to pick particular varieties to grow because of their ease of preserving. For example, Roma tomatoes are particularly good for a tomato sauce to freeze. It's not the only, obviously you can freeze or can all tomatoes, but they're particularly good because they're less watery and you don't have to cook them down quite as much. You might want to grow tomatoes that are particularly good at drying. That's just one example of how you might choose a variety related to preservation. And then if you know the produce that you can get out of a plant, it might help you know how many plants to grow in order to preserve what you want to last a particular amount of time. So those are some thoughts you might have. And then the other thing to think ahead about is just gathering the tools and supplies that you might need. There are, like other hobbies, there's lots of possible tools. And in the spirit of Leah's talk earlier, you might be able to borrow canners from neighbors or share with neighbors and have maybe this summer we'll be able to have preservation parties again. But there are various things that you can do to gather these things and not have them be terribly expensive. Start looking for dehydrators on sale or at thrift stores, etc. Next.
Or canning jars at estate sales.
Yeah,
We can
canning
have
jars.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
Those
exactly.
the canning jars were in short supply. The lid things were in short supply last
They
year.
were.
Woo!
Actually, let me say something about that. Do make sure that when you do buy lids, that you know where they're coming from. Apparently last year, Diane, you can correct me if I need some correcting, but apparently there were some online when they were really in short supply from like Ball and Kerr. You could buy some unbranded canning lids online, but apparently they were very poor at sealing. So it was somewhat of a waste of resources, because you might can something and then the seal wouldn't stay. So it's a reason to be sure about what you're purchasing, but that's a whole nother talk. So I will stop here and just hope that you have wonderful gardening and preserving season coming up.